Welcome to today's hardware check. Today I'm going to talk about NAS technology. I'm going to explain the benefits of a professional NAS system, and I'm going to demystify some of the commonly used terms like data deduplication, snapshot technology, data integrity. Okay, so and in the middle of the presentation I'm going to have a hands-on part which will explain you a little bit how a user may experience a professional NAS system. I'm going to use a real-life example, an existing product line, the Infortrend EonNAS. There are various models, but I'm not going to explain the differences between the various models. I'm going to focus on some key features. In this case, I have most of these systems have 12 disks with 24 terabytes. So it's a compact unit with storage and computer all in one box with a small footprint. It is easily scalable, as you will see later on. It can hold SATA or SAS disks, and of course it offers all RAID levels of protection. Okay. Interestingly, it will also take SSDs and utilize them in a way that you would probably not expect usually. Okay, so I'm going to explain that later, but it's very interesting actually. So I hope you stay with me. It's important to mention that the whole storage system is completely user interface driven. Okay, it is based on Solaris as an operating system, but as a user you will never see it. You will always see the user interface, and as such you have a certain ease of use. Okay, first let's take a look at a common NAS setup. Why is a professional NAS so much better? Well, first of all, a common NAS has storage, and the storage is managed by a computer up here. And basically the computer, or whoever needs to manage the computer, enables network share so that the whole company or office can access the storage. And this is already where the problem lies, because whoever needs to do that has to do a lot of configuration on an OS level. Okay, so he will probably close, open several windows, edit text files, and configure a lot of things on an OS level, and then he needs to do a lot of tedious user management, permission management. So it is actually a full-time job if you ask me, and that doesn't even include the whole aspect of data integrity, backups, automated backups especially. Okay, this is where a professional NAS system comes in this case the Infortrend NAS. Let's take a look at how you would add more storage to such a system. First of all, ideally, you would like to add storage whenever you like, so you don't want to have any downtime. And you would like to have an increase in performance when you add more storage, so that would be good as well. Of course, you're using more disks, so you should have more performance. And you would do this using expansion ports, so-called expansion ports using SAS connections. Okay. So basically, you just attach another storage device over SAS, and when that becomes full, you attach another one to it. Okay, so it's fairly simple, and it's easy to add storage, as you will see in the hands-on section later on. Just for reference, this is how this particular unit looks from the back, basically. So you have here an administration port, and then you have 4 Ethernet ports. Commonly, these would go into a switch, and if you want, you can enable link aggregation or bonding and have one single 4 gigabit Ethernet line rather than 4 separate 1 gig Ethernet lines. Okay, and then this is the expansion port where you would add extra storage. So it's fairly simple, fairly easy to connect. And let's take a look at how you would set up the users. Okay, here we are. This is how I interface with the EonNAS using a web browser. Of course, there are other ways as well, but this is the preferred method. And once I log in, I get a splash screen with the current overview of the running services. Currently, for example, FTP is off, so the FTP service is not running, I can't use it. I have an overview of my usage. Currently the NAS is actually empty, and if I click on the dashboard I can see the current CPU load, the memory that is used, so there's not much going on because I'm the only user. First of all, let's create some users and see how easy it actually is and how you can manage the whole thing. So let's add a user, let's add two users actually, student 1 and student 2, student 1, and let's give them passwords. Let's ignore the group name and also the description. I want to create a home directory for the student user so they can put their own data into that directory, but they are only allowed to put 200 gigabytes into this directory. So it's a so-called quota. I have created now my student user 1, and I'm going to do the same for student user 2. Okay. Now it's important to mention that at this stage I'm not really worrying about the permissions, so we're going to set that up later. Gigabytes, again 200, and let's say OK. If I want to see how it actually looks like, I click on shares, and in the shares I have the pool, so that is basically my storage, and in there I have my two users with empty volumes. Now let's think about how we would like to have the permissions. I can access this, for example, through shares, and in here I simply say edit. And what I want to do is that the student user 1 of course is allowed to do whatever he wants on that specific volume, but all the other users are just allowed to read. They are not allowed to write, so that's forbidden. And by the way, there are different protocols that you can access a network attached storage: SMB, NFS, AFP. You can select or deselect them. AFP is the Apple protocol, SMB is commonly used for Windows, NFS very popular on Linux systems. And that's pretty much it. Now I can actually start and let the users use my NAS. How would that work on a Mac, for example? Well, I can use a command to connect to the server. I can use either SMB or I can say I would like to use the Apple protocol or the NFS protocol. So all these three ways are possible. And just because I can, I'm going to use SMB. Okay, student 2, that's a user we would like to use at this stage. So I'm logging in, and now instead of accessing my own folder, I would like to give student 1 data. Okay, so I click on that volume. In here, let's create a folder, and as you would expect, it's not possible. Why? Because we just configured that everyone else except student 1 has no permissions for this particular folder or volume. Okay, so that's not going to work, but we can create data in our very own folder. So let's do that. Okay, I'm clicking on student 2, that's my very own folder, and in here I right click and say new folder. So that pretty much proves the concept, how I can use whatever protocol I defined in the NAS to connect to it and then create, based on the permissions, the folders. What else can you do? Well, one function that I would like to show you, because it's really easy to use, is the snapshot function. So let's say for a second, in here, that's the student 1 who just created an empty folder. That student would like to back up his data, or at least not really back up the data, but create a snapshot. So in case somebody deletes it, he can roll back. So let's click on student 1 and say snapshot. The snapshot allows me to be scheduled. So I can do it daily or weekly, whenever I want. More importantly, I can do it now, because that's what I want to do. So let's call it student 2 first. Okay, so the snapshot is created, And I have this little icon which shows that only student 2 at this point has a snapshot. And let's assume for a second someone changes the data of this folder, or for example deletes the data. Okay, so now it's gone. Fortunately, I can roll back to an earlier state. That's the whole point of the snapshot capability, by going into maintenance and say, I would like to have the student 2 with this particular snapshot and roll back. And since it's an empty folder, it's fairly quick, rolled back successfully. So that means if I go back to the shares, I can see the very same folder here again, and if I reconnect, I will see it as well. So currently it's empty. And if I reconnect to student 2, there it is again. Okay, so this is a very brief overview of just one of many functions that you have with the EonNAS. Maybe important to show, because it's good to know what happens if you run out of storage and you would attach just expansion storage. Well, you go ahead and say storage. In here we can see our pool with 20 terabytes, and if I would like to extend the pool, well, I would click on extend, and it will scan basically all disks that are available, and if there are any new disks, I simply select them here and say next, and it will, while everyone is using the NAS, extend the overall capacity.